We didn't recognize the moment right away, not because it was subtle, but because it looked so normal. A printed page, a quiet room, a pen placed where it wanted her hand to land. Camille North's experience matters because what broke her wasn't a stranger or a scandal. It was the way her own home learned to speak in contracts. What follows is the version she can still hear clearly. I knew something was wrong when the hotel staff brought a second folder, not a menu, not a schedule. A folder with a tab that had my name on it, typed clean like it belonged to payroll. My father sat at the center of the table, shoulders squared, trying on his old executive posture like a jacket he'd missed. My sister Juliet sat beside him, glossy and relaxed, like she'd only ever known rooms like this. "Camille," my father began, voice steady. "I want this to stay respectful." Juliet let out a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "He's being nice. Just take the win." "The win?" I echoed, and my throat tightened around it. The attorney slid the folder toward me without looking at my face. "This is your transition agreement." My father tapped the page once. "You'll receive $75,000. The number sat there like a punch dressed as a favor. Juliet leaned in. Perfume and confidence. "That's generous. Most people don't get anything when they're done helping." "Done," I repeated, slower this time. My father's mouth tightened. "You've carried a lot. It's time for you to step back. Your sister is stepping up." Juliet smiled, already practicing the version of herself she wanted the world to believe. "I have vision. You have dedication." The attorney cleared his throat and turned the page. "There is also a restrictive covenant. 5 years. My father didn't blink. "It's standard. Sign within 96 hours. I stared at the signature line. My hand was flat on the table, and I could feel my pulse in my palm. We watched the room hold its breath, the way people do when they think the hardest part is already decided. Juliet reached for my pen like she owned it. "Just sign. Camille. Don't make this weird." I pulled the pen back, kept my voice even. "I'm taking the folder." My father's eyes narrowed. "You're taking your time." "I'm taking what you gave me." I told him. 96 hours. On the drive home. My phone lit up with Juliet's name again and again. If you're here for stories where quiet work finally gets seen, subscribe and stay close. I didn't answer her calls. I opened my private inbox instead. A new email sat at the top. Board approval. Helix Biomedical Research Campus. The email stayed open on my screen while the elevator carried me down to the garage. I didn't read it again. I didn't need to. The subject line alone had weight. Board approval doesn't happen by accident. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. My father's name. I let it ring until it stopped. Then sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing through the tightness in my chest. 3 years earlier, I'd been standing in a very different lobby, holding renderings for a waterfront redevelopment in Vancouver. $90 million. That was the number everyone kept repeating, like it was proof I belonged in the room. The call came while I was waiting for the client. "Camille," my father's assistant said, voice thin and rushed. "Your dad collapsed. They're taking him to Northwestern." "It's bad." I remember looking down at the drawings in my hands, the clean lines, the future they represented. I remember folding them once, carefully, like I might come back to them soon. At the hospital, everything moved fast and slow at the same time. Machines, forms, a doctor explaining recovery in pieces. "He'll need full-time care," she said. "Months, maybe longer." My sister was already on the screen of my phone, calling from Europe. The connection lagged. Her face froze mid-sympathy. "I can't just leave," Juliet said. "Things are finally happening for me." I nodded because nodding was easier than arguing. "I'll stay," I told them. "I'll handle it." What that turned into was mornings that started before sunrise. medications laid out on the counter, physical therapy schedules taped to the fridge, nights answering emails from lenders who wanted reassurance that North Urban Group hadn't lost its grip. My father watched me do it all without comment. Sometimes he thanked me. Sometimes he forgot what day it was. When he was strong enough to sit at the kitchen table again, he looked at the spreadsheet I'd built to track cash flow. "You've always been organized," he said. Like that was the whole story. The Vancouver firm waited 3 weeks before they pulled the project. I found out through a polite email that wished me luck with my family situation. I didn't tell anyone. I just closed the laptop and made dinner. There were moments I thought someone would notice. A banker calling to say we'd survived a bad quarter because of my adjustments. A contractor telling my father the zoning extension only happened because I'd caught a filing error at midnight. But the recognition never stuck. We noticed how often she paused instead of speaking, how quickly she learned to swallow reactions that didn't have a place to land. By the time Juliet flew back into Chicago, tanned and smiling, the house was running on systems I'd built so quietly they blended into the walls. She hugged my father like she'd saved him. "See," she said, glancing at me. "I told you everything would be fine." I stood there holding a grocery bag with his low-sodium soup, thinking about how easy it was for people to confuse presence with effort. That night, alone in my childhood room, I opened my laptop and created a folder I hadn't needed before. Private. I didn't know yet what I was building toward. I just knew I wasn't going to disappear without proof. Juliet didn't ease back into the house. She arrived like the story had already been written and she was just stepping into her cue. The first morning, she stood in the kitchen with her phone angled just right, sunlight hitting her cheek. My father sat at the table, coffee cooling in his hands. "Look at you," she said, smiling for him in the screen. "Strong. I knew you'd bounce back." He laughed, the sound rusty but pleased. "Your sister kept things together." Juliet glanced at me, then back to him. Team effort. Later that week, she came with him to a meeting at the office. I stayed back to finish a report the lenders wanted before noon. When they returned, my father set his briefcase down and looked at me like he'd made a decision on the drive home. "Juliet's been keeping up with international contacts," he said. "It's good perspective." She nodded, crossing her legs. "You have to think globally now. That's where the growth is." I recognized the phrasing. I'd written it in a proposal 6 months earlier. At dinner, she told a story about a developer in Milan. Big name. Big ideas. My father listened, impressed. I passed him his medication and caught the way his attention stayed on her, steady and warm. "You should sit in on the next strategy call," he told her. "You've got instincts." Juliet lifted her glass. "I'm ready." The next call came and went without me. I found out after, when an email thread forwarded itself to my inbox by mistake. My name had been removed. Juliet's added. I scrolled through the comments, familiar phrases dressed up with new signatures. Strong thinking, Juliet, smart approach. I closed the laptop slowly and stared at the wall until the tightness in my chest settled enough to breathe around it. That afternoon, I walked into the study and saw her standing behind my father's desk. His chair, his view. Her phone was propped against a stack of folders. "This light is perfect," she said, not turning. "It makes everything look established." I waited. She finally looked up. "You don't mind." "Right. You've never really cared about the image side of things." I nodded because anything else would have turned into a scene. We noticed how the room seemed to rearrange itself around her without anyone asking it to. A few days later, my father mentioned a meeting with the limited partners. He spoke to Juliet, not to me. "You'll come with me," he said. "They should get used to seeing you." Juliet smiled, then added lightly, "Camille's more behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. The words landed and stayed. That night, I opened the private folder on my laptop and added another file. Dates, emails, versions of documents, not to confront anyone. Not yet. Just to keep the record straight somewhere. Down the hall. I could hear Juliet laughing on the phone, already telling the story the way she wanted it remembered. The first time Juliet took credit for something I'd done. It happened so smoothly, I almost missed it. We were in the living room. Paperwork spread across the coffee table. My father was on the phone with a lender, pacing slowly, careful with his balance. Juliet sat on the arm of the couch, scrolling through her tablet like she was reviewing notes. Yes, she said into the quiet space, timing it just right. We restructured the repayment schedule last quarter to give ourselves breathing room. My father stopped pacing. That was smart. Juliet smiled, eyes still on the screen. It was obvious once you looked at the numbers. I felt my mouth open, then close. The restructuring had happened at 2 a.m. after I realized one clause could be renegotiated. I'd sent the revised draft before sunrise. My father ended the call and turned to her. Good instincts. Juliet shrugged. I've always had a head for this. Later, in the kitchen, I reached for a glass and my hand shook just enough to notice. You didn't mention my name, I said quietly. She leaned against the counter. Casual. I didn't say you didn't help. That wasn't help. Her expression shifted, a flicker of impatience. Camille, this is how leadership works. You don't need credit for everything. I looked at the floor because looking at her would have made it harder to stay calm. Another week passed, then another. A proposal I'd drafted showed up in a meeting packet with Juliet's name on the cover. The language was mine. The structure, too. She talked through it like she'd lived inside the work. My father nodded along. You really understand the business. Juliet met my eyes across the table, held them, didn't blink. I said nothing. We noticed how silence started doing work of its own, filling gaps where names should have been. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop. I copied the original file, the metadata intact, and saved it into the private folder. I added a note, date, time, draft history, not for revenge, not yet, just so something somewhere knew the truth. The next morning, Juliet knocked on my door without waiting for an answer. Dad wants me to handle the limited partner update, she said, already halfway inside. You've got all the background notes. Right. They're in the shared drive. She hesitated. Can you send them directly to me? I watched her face, the confidence, the ease with which she assumed the handoff. I'll forward what's relevant. She smiled like that settled it. Perfect. After she left, I sat there longer than I meant to. The house felt different, quieter in a way that wasn't peaceful. I opened the private folder again and added one more line. First misattribution. I closed the laptop and went back downstairs, carrying the weight without letting it show. The meeting invitation came through my calendar like it was routine. Private dining room. 4 Seasons. Noon. No agenda attached. Juliet was already dressed when I walked into the hotel. Cream blazer, hair pulled back, phone in hand. She smiled like we were celebrating something. Relax, she said, touching my arm. This is just a formality. The room was quiet in that expensive way. Too quiet. My father sat at the head of the table, a leather folder placed neatly in front of him. An attorney I recognized from past closings sat to his right. 2 limited partners were already there, polite, unreadable. We took our seats. My father didn't waste time. I've been thinking about succession, he began, fingers steepled. The company needs clear leadership moving forward. Juliet straightened, anticipation barely contained. I've decided to appoint Juliet as managing director, effective immediately. She let out a breath, practiced but emotional. Thank you. I won't let you down. My father nodded, then turned toward me. The warmth didn't follow. Camille, your role here is changing. The attorney slid a folder across the table, the same color as the one from the hotel staff days earlier. This outlines your transition, he said evenly. There's a compensation component. I opened it. $75,000. written out in careful legal language. My father spoke again. You've done a lot for this family. This is recognition. Recognition, I repeated, the word dry in my mouth. Juliet leaned in. It's generous. Camille. Really? I kept reading. Turned the page. There's a restrictive covenant, the attorney added. 5 years. My eyes moved down the paragraph. No competition. No consulting. No clients in overlapping markets. My father watched my face. It's standard. Protects everyone. 96 hours, the attorney said. That's the signing window. I closed the folder slowly. The sound felt louder than it should have. You want me to leave? I said, keeping my voice level, and not work. My father didn't hesitate. I want you to step back. Juliet needs space to lead. Juliet smiled like this was the natural order of things. You're great behind the scenes. This lets you rest. Rest. After 3 years of mornings that started before sunrise, we noticed how the room waited for her response, how no one rushed to soften the silence. I placed the folder on the table. I'll take the documents. The attorney hesitated, then nodded. My father's jaw tightened. You're taking your time. I'm taking what you offered. I replied. 96 hours. Juliet laughed, light and dismissive. Don't drag this out. Just sign and we can move on. I stood. My legs felt steady, even if the rest of me didn't. I'll be in touch. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message from Juliet before the elevator doors closed. Don't be difficult. This is what's best. I didn't respond. In the garage, I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the dashboard until my breathing evened out. My hands shook when I finally opened the folder again. $75,000. 5 years. A clean exit, priced and packaged. I checked my watch. 96 hours had already started. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat and logged into my private email. The subject line was still there. Waiting. Unchanged. Board approval. Helix Biomedical Research Campus. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just let the silence settle, knowing something had shifted, even if no one else in that room had felt it yet. I didn't go home after the meeting. I drove until the city thinned out and parked along the river. Laptop balanced on the passenger seat like it belonged there. The email was still open. Board approval. Helix Biomedical Research Campus. I read past the subject line this time, slowly, line by line. San Diego, Master Planning and Design. $120 million spelled out in careful language that left no room for doubt. My name attached to the signature block. My company's name beneath it. My phone rang before I finished the attachment. Camille, Donna said. No greeting, straight to it. You sound like someone who just had the ground move. I got the approval. A pause. Then a breath I could hear through the line. All right. Then let's talk about what they put in front of you. I met her at her office an hour later. She slid the transition agreement across the desk without ceremony. Your father tied the restrictive covenant to continued benefit, she said, flipping pages. Once you're out, it doesn't hold. I watched her finger trace the clause. They want me to sign. They want control, she replied. Signing doesn't give them that. I leaned back, the chair creaking softly. If I sign, they think I'm done. Dana nodded. That's the mistake. We sat with that for a moment, the kind of quiet where decisions take shape. I don't want to sneak around, I said finally. I don't want this to look like revenge. It won't, she said. It'll look like timing. I signed the document 2 days later, not at the Four Seasons, not at home, at a small cafe near the office where no one knew my name. My hand didn't shake. When I slid the signed pages back into the folder, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. My phone buzzed as I stood to leave. Juliet, did you sign? I typed back one word. Yes. The reply came almost instantly. Good. Dad will be relieved. I put the phone away and walked out into the afternoon. We noticed how calm she was after, how the weight seemed to move from her shoulders to somewhere steadier. The next morning, an email from Helix came through confirming the press schedule. Investor Summit. Chicago. Same hotel. I forwarded it to Dana with a single line. Let's be precise. That evening, my father called. His voice sounded almost kind. "Thank you for handling this," he said. "It's for the best. For everyone." I replied. "Yes," he agreed, missing the shift. "Now we can move forward." I ended the call and sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, folder resting against my knee. They thought the story was finished. I opened my laptop and began organizing my files. Renderings, timelines, signed approvals. Every piece of work that had lived quietly under my name, not to prove anything, just to be ready when the room changed its mind about who belonged in it. The ballroom looked exactly the way it always did. Neutral carpet, soft lighting, chairs arranged in perfect lines, like no one wanted to be the first to disrupt anything. I took a seat near the back, close enough to see the stage, far enough that no one felt the need to acknowledge me. Juliet stood near the podium, red dress, posture practiced. My father moved through the room shaking hands, steady again, confident. He didn't look in my direction. The opening remarks blurred together. Growth, stability, vision, words that had always sounded solid until they were tested. Juliet stepped up next. "I'm honored," she began, voice smooth. "North Urban Group is entering a new chapter, and I'm proud to help lead it forward." Applause followed, polite and expected. She took a breath, ready to continue, when a man in the front row stood, mid-40s, gray jacket, calm. "If I may," he said, already holding a microphone. "Before the leadership transition continues, Helix would like to make an announcement." A ripple moved through the room. My father frowned slightly but nodded. The man turned, scanning the audience. His eyes landed on me. "We'd like to introduce the architect behind our new biomedical research campus." The silence came fast, thick. Juliet's smile stalled. I stood, my knees locked for a second, then released. Every step toward the aisle felt louder than it should have. "Camille North," the man said. "Founder of Camille North Studio." My father's head snapped up. Juliet turned fully now, confusion breaking through the polish. I reached the front and took the microphone from the stand. My hands were steady. "3 years ago," I said, letting my voice carry without pushing, "I chose family over opportunity. Today, the market made a different choice." The screen behind me lit up. Renderings, timelines, the Helix campus, labeled clearly, signed approvals, dates. The Helix executive spoke again. We reviewed multiple proposals, including one from North Urban Group. Camille's work stood apart, conceptually, financially. A murmur spread. I could see the limited partners leaning toward each other, phones coming out. Juliet shook her head. "This isn't appropriate," she said, reaching for the microphone. "This is a misunderstanding." The Helix executive didn't look at her. Our decision was final. I glanced toward my father. His face had gone pale, then tight, like he was trying to hold 2 versions of reality in place at once. We noticed how the room shifted. We thought quietly, how attention reassigns itself without asking permission. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One message, then another. A banker leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "If this is accurate, our exposure changes." Another voice followed. "We need to review governance." Juliet stepped back from the podium, breath quick, eyes searching the room for something familiar to grab onto. My father moved closer, dropping his voice. "Camille, we should discuss this privately." I met his eyes. "You chose this room." He swallowed. I handed the microphone back and stepped away. No speeches, no explanations. As I passed Juliet, she whispered, "You planned this." I prepared. I replied, keeping my pace. The applause didn't come. What followed was louder, chairs shifting, conversations breaking open, the careful order of the room dissolving. I reached the exit as voices rose behind me, overlapping, urgent. Outside, the hallway felt too quiet by comparison. I leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing in, then out. Behind the doors, the story kept unraveling without me. I straightened, walked toward the elevators, and felt the weight I'd been carrying finally loosen its grip. My father asked to meet 3 days later. Not at the house, not at the office he still considered his. He called and said my address out loud, slow, like he was testing whether it belonged to me now. When he arrived, he stood in the doorway longer than necessary, taking in the framed drawings, the clean desk, the city visible through the glass. He didn't comment on any of it. "You've done well," he said finally. I poured coffee and set the mug across from him. He didn't touch it. "The lenders are nervous," he continued. "The limited partners want reassurance. This can still be stabilized." I waited. He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Come back. We'll make a role for you. Title, compensation, authority." "How much authority?" He hesitated. "We can discuss scope." I shook my head once. "That's not an answer." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand the position you've put us in. I understand it exactly." He exhaled, slower now. "You're my daughter, and you priced me like overhead." The words landed between us and stayed there. We noticed how he looked smaller in that moment, not diminished, just uncertain, like someone standing on a floor that had quietly shifted. He straightened. "What do you want?" I slid a folder across the table. "Project-based collaboration only. No reporting lines, no veto power. My firm operates independently." He flipped through the pages, eyes scanning faster than before. "And Juliet," I added. "No executive authority without formal training. That's non-negotiable." His mouth opened, then closed. "She's your sister. She's unprepared." Silence settled, not angry, heavy. He nodded once. "The board won't like this. They don't have to." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to match this version of me with the one he thought he knew. "You planned all of this." I planned to be valued. He signed 3 days later, not because he wanted to, because there was nothing left to leverage. When he left, he paused at the door. "Your mother would have understood you." I didn't answer. After he was gone, I sat at my desk and closed the folder. Outside, traffic moved the way it always did, indifferent, continuous. I opened my laptop and returned to work, not as a statement, not as a victory, just as myself, finally operating on terms that didn't need permission. The building opened on a quiet Tuesday. No banners, no speeches, just people walking through the doors like they'd been there before. I stood near the back as the Helix team moved in, clipboards tucked under arms, coffee cups already sweating onto the counters. A project manager waved when she saw me. "Morning, Camille. The labs on level 3 are ready for inspection. I'll be there in a minute." I walked the atrium once. Slow. Sunlight cut across the floor the way I'd drawn it years earlier, when this was still an idea living on my laptop between hospital shifts. I ran my hand along the railing, felt the cool metal, the solidness of it. Later that week, Juliet sent an email. Short, careful, I'm enrolled. I know I don't get to skip steps anymore. I read it once and archived it. Not angry. Just finished. My father didn't come to the opening. He sent a note instead. 2 sentences. He hoped the building would do well. He said my mother would have liked it. I believed the second part. That evening, I drove out of the city and parked near the cemetery where my mother was buried. The air was cooler there, quieter. I sat on the low stone wall and watched the light change. I didn't disappear, I said out loud, surprising myself with how steady it sounded. I was working. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt accurate. Camille North used to measure herself by how much she could hold together without being seen. Now, she noticed smaller things. When she slept, when she stopped apologizing for space, when her work showed up in the world with her name attached and no explanation needed. I went home and set my phone on the counter. A notification blinked from the channel. If this story stayed with you, you can follow along here. I turned the phone face down and made dinner. Later, when the apartment settled into its nighttime sounds, I opened my laptop and started a new folder. No labels, no backup plan. Just the next thing I wanted to build. Only after her thoughts had finished moving did we step back in. Not to explain, not to frame it, just to note how calm the room felt once she stopped asking it to make space for her.